There comes a moment when you stop trying to fix what's already broken and finally decide to walk away, not out of anger, but out of peace. You realize that not every story needs a goodbye, not every ending needs closure, and not every person deserves a second chance to explain what they ruined. Deleting him from your world isn't about hate, it's about freedom. It's the quiet decision to no longer participate in your own heartbreak. You stop checking his updates, stop waiting for his message, stop giving energy to someone who only remembered you when it was convenient. You don't announce it, you don't make it dramatic, you just disappear from the parts of his world where you once poured your heart. Because silence speaks volumes, and your peace will always be louder than your pain, this isn't about pretending it never mattered. It's about finally accepting that you matter more. You gave love that was real, effort that was pure, and patience that wasn't matched. Now you give yourself permission to leave without regret, without explanation, without goodbye, because the most powerful thing you can do for yourself is to move on like he was never the center of your world to begin with. Silence is the most underrated form of strength. It's not passive, it's not weak, it's powerful. When someone takes you for granted, when they play with your emotions, when they keep you hanging between almost and never, silence becomes your loudest statement. Saying nothing doesn't mean you don't have anything to say. It means you've finally realized that your energy is too valuable to waste on someone who stopped listening a long time ago. A goodbye seeks closure, but silence creates it. Because when you stop responding, stop explaining, stop trying to make them understand, you reclaim control over your peace. There's a part of you that will want to say something to remind him of what he lost, to make him see your worth, to show him how deeply he hurt you. That's human, but here's the truth. Words rarely change people who are never willing to hear them. The more you explain, the more you hand him power. Silence, on the other hand, confuses the ego. When you disappear without noise, without tears, without giving him the satisfaction of knowing what you feel, that's when he starts to wonder. Your absence becomes a mirror, reflecting everything he took for granted. Goodbyes can often be invitations for one more round of manipulation, one more chance for him to pull you back in with false promises or emotional guilt. But when you walk away quietly, he doesn't get that opportunity. He's left with nothing but the echo of your silence. And that echo, that's what keeps him up at night, because he can't argue with silence, he can't manipulate silence, he can't control silence. It's your final boundary, firm, calm, unshakable. Silence also heals you. When you're silent, you stop feeding your pain with constant conversation about it. You stop reopening the wound by checking if it still bleeds. You create space for peace to settle where chaos used to live. You start hearing your own voice again instead of the noise of what went wrong. You begin to realize that you don't need to be understood to move on. You just need to understand yourself, and that's something silence allows. Most people think closure comes from a final conversation, but often it comes from finally having none. You don't need his explanation. You don't need his validation. You don't need to hear why it ended or what could have been different. You already know what you needed to know. His actions spoke for him, and once you accept that, silence becomes your truth. It's not a punishment, it's protection. It's your way of saying, I've said all I need to say, and now I choose peace. When you stop responding, you shift the power dynamic. He no longer gets to decide when or how the story ends. You do, and the beauty of that is, your silence doesn't just end the relationship. It ends the emotional control he had over you. You stop being reactive, you stop chasing answers, you stop needing him to acknowledge your pain, because deep down you already know he can't heal what he broke. Only you can, and that's the ultimate strength to walk away, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in silence. To let your peace speak for you, to let your calm be the message, because silence isn't emptiness. It's full of everything you've learned. It's full of self-respect, self-worth, and quiet confidence. One day he'll realize that your silence wasn't indifference, it was the sound of you reclaiming your power. And when that day comes, he'll understand that losing your voice wasn't his punishment, losing your presence was. Letting go of someone isn't just about deleting their number or unfollowing their profile. It's about detaching from the fantasy you created in your mind. Because the hardest part of moving on isn't losing the person, it's losing the version of them you fell for. The one who made you feel seen, valued, and safe before they slowly became inconsistent, distant, and confusing. The truth is, you weren't just holding on to him, you were holding on to potential, to the idea of what it could have been if he had kept showing up the way he did in the beginning. And that illusion is what keeps people stuck long after the relationship ends. You replay the good moments, the laughter, the late night talks, and you convince yourself that's who he really was. But what you forget is that consistency reveals character, not chemistry. Anyone can be perfect for a few weeks, a few months, but the person they are, when it's no longer convenient, is who they truly are. And that version, the one who stopped showing up, stopped trying, stopped caring, that's the reality you need to accept. The moment you stop romanticizing who he was and start seeing who he is, the fantasy begins to fade. That's when detachment begins. It's easy to miss someone when you're only remembering their highlights. Your mind edits out the red flags, the quiet neglect, the times you had to chase clarity, the times you felt small. But real healing comes when you see the full picture, when you remember not just the butterflies, but also the confusion. When you stop saying, maybe he'll change, and start saying, maybe he already showed me who he is. The fantasy keeps you hoping, the truth sets you free. Detaching from the fantasy means taking accountability for your own illusions, recognizing that sometimes we fall in love with the potential of what someone could be, not the reality of what they are willing to be. You gave love freely, you believed deeply, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. But now it's time to love yourself enough to stop living in imagination. Because holding on to a dream that doesn't exist is another form of self-betrayal. You can't build a future with someone who only ever existed in your mind. When you detach from the fantasy, you begin to see the relationship for what it truly was, not what you wanted it to be. You stop taking the blame for why it ended and start realizing that love alone isn't enough if effort, respect, and consistency aren't present. You stop saying, if only I had done more, and start seeing that no amount of love can fix someone who doesn't want to grow. That's when the illusion breaks and clarity steps in. And clarity, though painful, is freedom. You might still have moments of longing, flashes of nostalgia, that's normal. But those moments will no longer control you because you'll recognize them for what they are, remnants of a fantasy. The version of him that made promises he couldn't keep, that made you feel like the only one but treated you like an option. When you stop giving power to that version, you stop missing him. You begin to grieve the illusion, and once that grief passes, peace takes its place. You'll know you've detached when you stop hoping he'll become the person you imagined, when you no longer wait for the message, the apology, or the change. When you no longer need the fairy tale to feel complete, because now you understand that you were the real thing all along, the consistent one, the loyal one, the one who showed up. You were never asking for too much, you were just asking the wrong person. And once you let go of the fantasy, you make space for something real, something that won't need to be imagined, because it will show up every single day. When you delete him from your world, it might feel like the end, but it's actually the beginning of something far greater. For a long time, you may have built your life around him. Your days revolved around his messages, your emotions depended on his moods, and your peace was tied to whether or not he showed you affection. You didn't even realize how small your world had become until he left it. But that's what happens when you love deeply. You unconsciously shrink your world to fit someone else's presence. You put your energy, time, and attention into keeping the connection alive, even when it stopped nourishing you. So when it finally ends, you feel empty, like everything meaningful has been erased. But here's the truth. When he left, your world didn't end, it simply started expanding again. At first, the silence feels unbearable. The space he used to occupy feels like a void. But as the days go by, that silence starts to feel different. It becomes peaceful instead of painful. You start to realize how much mental and emotional energy you used to spend thinking about him, analyzing his words, worrying about his distance, trying to make sense of his inconsistency. Now, that same energy begins to flow back to you. You rediscover parts of yourself that had gone quiet while you were busy trying to make him love you. You start laughing without forcing it, focusing without distraction, and dreaming without fear. The world around you feels alive again because you finally have the space to breathe. When someone exits your life, the mind immediately focuses on what you've lost, the memories, the comfort, the companionship. But you rarely see what you've gained. You've gained freedom. You've gained clarity. You've gained the opportunity to rebuild your world without having to shrink yourself for someone else's comfort. You can now fill your days with people who genuinely show up, with passions that excite you, with peace that doesn't depend on anyone's approval. The moment you stop orbiting around someone who only gave you fragments, you become the center of your own universe again. The beautiful part of deleting him from your world is that it allows you to rewrite your story. Maybe, for a long time, your identity was tied to him, being his girlfriend, his confidant, his emotional support. But now it's about rediscovering who you are without the label, without the attachment. What do you love? What do you want? What kind of peace feels like home to you? These are questions you might have forgotten to ask while you were too busy trying to keep him interested. Now, you get to find the answers, and they'll lead you back to yourself. The world starts to expand the moment you stop trying to pull him back into it. You'll notice new opportunities, new friendships, new passions. You'll start to attract people who match your healed energy instead of your wounded one. Because when you delete him, you're not just cutting off contact, you're clearing emotional space. You're signaling to life that you're ready for something more aligned, more genuine, more peaceful. You're no longer stuck in the cycle of waiting for love to return. You're opening yourself up to receive love that's ready to stay. Deleting him isn't losing, it's liberating. It's saying, I deserve more than confusion and half effort. It's a declaration that your happiness no longer depends on someone's inconsistency. The world doesn't get smaller when he leaves. It gets bigger because now it's filled with possibilities that aren't clouded by disappointment. One day you'll look back and realize that losing him wasn't the end of your story, it was the turning point. The moment your world started to expand again, the moment you began to live fully, freely, and authentically. And you'll smile, not because you miss him, but because you finally see how small he was compared to the life you've built without him. Regret often creeps in after we walk away, whispering that maybe we gave up too soon, that maybe we should have tried harder, or that maybe if we had been different, things could have worked out. But that's the lie heartbreak tells you, that your effort wasn't enough. The truth is, when you gave your best, there's nothing left to regret. You loved fully, you showed up consistently, you cared deeply, you didn't hold back your words, your effort, or your heart. That means you can walk away in peace, because regret only belongs to those who didn't give their all, and that's not you. When someone takes you for granted, it's easy to look back and replay the moments you wish had gone differently. You remember the things you said in anger, the moments you stayed when you should have left, or the love you kept giving when it wasn't returned. But that's not failure, that's humanity. You gave love the way you knew how at the time. You acted from your heart, not from your fear. And that's something to be proud of, not ashamed of. The reason you can walk away without regret is because you didn't betray yourself to make it work. You gave everything you could, and when it still wasn't enough, you had the courage to stop trying. That's strength, not loss. So often, people confuse regret with reflection. Reflection is healthy. It helps you grow, learn, and understand your boundaries better. But regret keeps you stuck in the past, punishing yourself for caring too much, loving too deeply, or staying too long. The truth is, you did exactly what your heart needed to do to learn its lesson. If you hadn't loved him that deeply, you wouldn't have understood your worth so clearly now. The pain became your teacher, and through it, you discovered what kind of love you no longer accept. So, no, you don't need regret, you just need understanding. There's also a kind of peace that comes when you realize love isn't always enough. You can do everything right, be loyal, supportive, patient, and still not get the outcome you hoped for. That doesn't mean you failed, it means it wasn't meant to continue. Not every connection is meant to last forever. Some are meant to shape you, to wake you up, to prepare you for something greater. You can look back and say, I loved him, but I love myself more now. That's not coldness, that's growth. Walking away without regret means you stop waiting for validation from the person who hurt you. You don't need him to realize your worth for it to exist. You don't need an apology to confirm that your love was real. The proof of your sincerity is in your actions, not his acknowledgement. You were brave enough to give, brave enough to hope, and brave enough to walk away when it wasn't reciprocated. That's emotional maturity, that's power. One day, he might realize what you gave, and that realization might haunt him, but that's his lesson to live with, not yours. You've already learned yours. You learned that you can love deeply without losing yourself. You learned that closure doesn't come from him. It comes from knowing you stayed true to your heart. You learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop trying. So, when you think of him, don't let regret be the emotion that rises. Let gratitude take its place. Gratitude for the strength you found through pain, for the lessons you learned, for the self-worth you reclaimed. Because walking away without regret means you honor the love you gave without letting it define you anymore. You can smile knowing that even though he couldn't meet you where you were, you met yourself. You don't need a happy ending with him. The happy ending is you, healed, free, and stronger than you've ever been. Healing doesn't happen when you keep checking the door to see if he'll come back. It begins the moment you close that door for good, when you stop waiting for the apology that never came, the text that never arrived, the explanation that wouldn't change anything anyway. Healing begins in silence, in solitude, in the uncomfortable stillness of letting go. It's not dramatic or loud. It's the quiet decision to stop chasing clarity from someone who was never capable of giving it. You start to rebuild yourself not by finding answers, but by accepting that some stories are meant to end without them. The process of deleting someone from your world isn't about erasing the memories. It's about removing the emotional control those memories have over you. You might still remember the way he laughed, the way he made you feel, or the way you believed he was different, and that's okay. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means you can think about those moments and not feel broken anymore. It's when his name doesn't sting, his face doesn't trigger pain, and his absence doesn't feel like a loss. That's real freedom when the emotions fade, but the wisdom remains. In the beginning, it will hurt. Your mind will try to pull you back to the comfort of the familiar, even if that comfort came with pain. You'll have moments where you almost text him, where you scroll through old photos or wonder if he misses you. That's part of the process. It's your heart detoxing from attachment. You were addicted to the emotional highs and lows, to the version of him you hoped he would be. But each time you resist the urge to reach out, you're teaching your heart something powerful. That peace matters more than the illusion of love. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you reclaim a little more of your power. Healing also means learning to fill your life again, not with distractions, but with purpose. It's about rediscovering who you are without him, the things you stopped doing because you were too focused on him, the dreams you paused, the passions you neglected. When you start doing those things again, you remind yourself that you were whole before he came, and you can be whole again after he's gone. Love might have shaken you, but it didn't destroy you. You still have a heart that's capable of joy, laughter, and depth. It just needs your attention now, not his. As you heal, you'll notice something beautiful. You stop needing to win the breakup. You stop wondering if he's suffering, if karma has found him, or if he's moved on. You stop caring about being the one who got away. Instead, you just want peace. You stop competing with the ghost of what you once were. You stop replaying the past and start being present in your own life again. That's the moment you realize healing isn't about him anymore. It's about you, your growth, your calm, your evolution. One day, without realizing it, you'll wake up and feel lighter. You'll hear a song that once reminded you of him and feel nothing. You'll pass the places you once avoided and feel indifferent. You'll see someone new and realize your heart is open again, not to fill a void, but to share love from a place of abundance, not pain. That's when you'll know you've deleted him from your heart completely, not because you forced yourself to forget, but because you finally remembered yourself. Healing isn't an event, it's a quiet transformation, one where you stop needing closure and start creating peace. And in that peace, you'll find the kind of strength that no heartbreak can ever take away again. Walking away without regret is the most powerful move you'll ever make. Because regret keeps you tied to the past, to the what-ifs, to the illusion that something could have been different if you had just tried harder, waited longer, or loved better. But the truth is, you did enough, you gave more than enough, you stayed longer than you should have, hoped when you had no reason to, and forgave when you should have protected yourself. Regret doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the person who took you for granted. When you finally understand that, you stop carrying the guilt for someone else's inability to love you right. Leaving without regret doesn't mean the story didn't hurt. It means you've reached a place where the pain no longer defines you. It's when you stop romanticizing the good moments and start remembering the truth that you were never truly happy because you were constantly trying to earn the love that should have been given freely. You stop replaying conversations, stop wondering where it went wrong, and start seeing that it ended because you finally outgrew what was breaking you. Walking away without regret is your heart's way of saying, I deserve better than almost love. You don't need to make a scene or explain why you're leaving. Some exits are meant to be silent, graceful, confident, final. You just let your absence speak. Because when you leave quietly, the echo of your silence becomes deafening to the one who once underestimated your worth. They start to notice the void you left behind, the peace you brought, the love they misused, but by then, you've already moved on. You're not checking if they've realized your value, because your focus has shifted from proving your worth to protecting your peace. No goodbye can ever match the impact of indifference. When you reach the point where you no longer need closure, validation, or attention, that's when you've truly deleted someone from your world. Regret has no space to exist when you're rooted in peace. You start to realize that your life is expanding in ways it never could when you were busy shrinking to fit into his. You're meeting new people, pursuing passions, rediscovering joy. You're finally investing in the person who deserves it most, yourself. The truth is, he may feel the loss later. Maybe when he's alone, maybe when someone new can't match your energy, or maybe when he realizes what your quiet strength really meant. But that's not your concern anymore. Karma has its own timing, and so does healing. What matters is that you've stepped into a version of yourself that no longer waits for someone else's remorse to validate your decision. You've broken the cycle. You've ended the chapter with dignity. Walking away without regret is freedom in its purest form. It's choosing yourself without needing permission. It's releasing the story without resentment. It's knowing that your worth doesn't decrease just because someone else failed to see it. You don't need revenge, you don't need closure, and you don't need a goodbye. Because the moment you stopped fighting for someone who wasn't fighting for you, you already won. You chose peace over chaos, healing over heartbreak, and self-respect over attention. That's not weakness, that's strength. That's the quiet confidence of someone who's done explaining, done fixing, done waiting. You've deleted him not just from your phone, but from your energy, your thoughts, your world. And in doing so, you've made room for something far greater. A love that starts within and never has to be earned again. There comes a point where you stop trying to understand why he didn't value you, and instead, you start appreciating that you finally value yourself. Deleting him from your world isn't an act of bitterness, it's an act of liberation. You're not erasing your past, you're reclaiming your power. You're closing a chapter that no longer deserves your rereading, and that's not loss, that's growth. Because the truth is, peace doesn't come from getting even, it comes from moving on quietly, with your head high and your heart healed. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone who couldn't see it. You don't need to make him regret it. Life will take care of that. Your job is to live so fully, so unapologetically, that the version of you who once begged for love no longer exists. One day, you'll look back and smile, not because it didn't hurt, but because you survived what once tried to break you. You'll thank yourself for walking away, for choosing silence over chaos, for deleting him not just from your phone, but from your mind, your energy, your life. That's what true healing looks like, not a perfect ending, but a peaceful one. You've finally learned that the best closure isn't a goodbye, it's a quiet heart that no longer cares to look back.